stage with Leah Busque. Thanks so much for coming, Leah.
Thanks for having me.
So we would love to learn a bit more about your background and how you invest. Actually, why don't we start there? Tell us about, what were you doing before you became an investor?
So before I joined Fuel Capital, I founded a company called TaskRabbit, which I ran as CEO for 8 years. Founded that company back in 2008 in the Boston area, which is where I was living at the time. And then over the course of the next 8 years, scaled it up, moved out here to the Bay Area, raised about $50 million in venture, opened 44 markets across the U.S., opened London as the first international city. For those of you who may not know, TaskRabbit is an online and mobile marketplace where you can connect with local individuals to get small jobs, tasks, and errands done. And so after scaling it up over 8 years, I transitioned my role to chair of the board. I up-leveled my whole team. Stacy Brown-Philpott remains CEO today, and we went through an acquisition process. We sold the company to IKEA last fall, so it's been about 9 months now since that deal closed. Prior to founding TaskRabbit, I was an engineer at IBM and programmed in mostly C++ programming, working on products called Lotus Notes and Domino. And I spent 8 years at IBM working on those products. And then that was my first job actually out of college. And I went to Sweetbriar College where I was a math computer science major.
That's awesome. That's really awesome. And congratulations on the acquisition.
Thank you.
And so I want to dive in a little bit into your background. You had mentioned that you moved TaskRabbit from Boston to here in the Bay Area. Talk about that. Like, what was that process like, and why did you make that decision? Do you think that, this is the better place to build a software company, or?
So, not necessarily. And I think that, times have changed a lot since I started TaskRabbit back in 2008. It's been a full decade. When I founded the company in Boston in 2008, it was a very tough economic time. I left my job at IBM in June of that year, locked myself in my house for 10 weeks straight to build and code the first version of the site, got it launched in Boston in September of 2008. Literally the same time that the stock market was crashing, people were being laid off. I mean, it was just a horrendous time, I thought, to be starting a company. Certainly for quitting my own cushy job at IBM where I was getting paid very well and doing a startup. But it turned out to be the best time to start a company like TaskRabbit because there were so many people that were looking for new ways of working, looking to make ends meet. They wanted to get paid on the platform. And so I got it launched in Boston in September, bootstrapped it for what I thought was going to be about 6, maybe 9 months. And I thought I'd raise a little bit of seed funding in the Boston area and then grow the business from there. Turned out to be a really rough time to be raising money from venture. No one was writing checks. Particularly consumer internet in Boston in 2008 was really, really hard. Facebook had just left Boston and moved out here to Palo Alto to build that company and scale it. And so, it was just a different time. I had gotten an opportunity to come out to the Bay Area to participate in an incubator program called FB Fund, which was run by Facebook. It was backed by Founders Fund and Excel. And came out here for 12 weeks to participate in that incubator. It was the first time I had ever set foot on the West Coast. I had never been on the West Coast before in my life.
Wow.
But I remember stepping off the plane and coming down to Palo Alto and just looking around, and it was like this completely different world. And you could sit in a coffee shop and overhear people talking about their startups and overhear investors talking about investing in companies, and just very different from sitting in a coffee shop in Boston where, you'd mostly overhear people talking about financial services or the finance industry. And so that's what really led me to say, at the end of that program, I really want to start to build the team and the company out here in the Bay Area. Again, just a very different time. I think Boston is an incredible city with incredible entrepreneurs, and over the course of the last decade has changed and grown a lot in different ways. I firmly believe you can build a company anywhere in the world.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have a strong inclination that it has to be the Bay Area, it has to be Silicon Valley. In fact, The companies that we've invested in are spread across the Bay Area, Seattle, New York, LA. We even have a company based out of Atlanta. And so I think it's more about connecting with entrepreneurs that are really purpose-built for the company that they're creating and are really passionate about the problem that they're solving. To me, that's the number one most important thing.
So actually, now that you brought that up, let's dive into the investing side a little bit. At Fuel Capital, where do you look?
We look everywhere. I mean, our strategy is really more stage focused than it is category focused. And so we like to invest at the earliest stages. Anything before Series A really makes sense for us. People call it pre-seed, seed. I've even heard the term mango seed, which I find hilarious. And so any of that area works for our fund model. Because I'm a math major and because I ran a company for a decade and I'm an engineer, I'm highly analytical, and so I truly believe that the fund strategy is really based on your fund size and your fund model. And so for us, we run a $50 million fund. We like to invest in seed companies. We'll typically write a $500 to $750K check when a company is raising $2 to $3 million. And we invest across a lot of different categories. So everything from consumer to B2B software, dev tools and infrastructure as well. My partner, Chris Howard, who's the founder of Fuel, he founded Fuel 5 years ago, has an incredible track record in the dev tools and infrastructure space. And so that's an area that we've kind of carved out as part of our core investments in the fund. But we'll really look at everything. We've done investments in healthcare and aerospace, in food, commerce, retail. So it's really more about finding the stage that makes sense and then finding the right fit with entrepreneur.
So actually, let's dive into that. Like stage, what does that mean? Because everything is pretty much pre-Series A these days in the early stage realm.
Yeah.
Like, give us a sense of what does that look like? Is there traction? What does the traction look like? Or is it about a certain qualitative understanding?
It ebbs and flows. We like to see a little bit of traction. We like to see the product in market. The model proved out slightly, just signals that this is something that is going to work. It doesn't have to be working right now, but a small user base, a little bit of traction, or it could just really be a market and a model and a founder that we have high conviction on. Maybe we've known the founder for a long time, and so you can get a little bit more comfortable writing a $500K check if you know that person, you've seen them execute before. Or maybe it's a marketplace business and a marketplace model that I understand really deeply from operating at TaskRabbit and can really see how all the pieces work and have a lot of conviction that the founder can pull all those pieces together and make it work. So really it's fluid. And, we've, again, invested in everything from a founder with a pitch deck and no product in market yet, everything up to a company that comes to you with $2 million, annual revenue, and a product that they want to go on and scale and build out further. So it just really depends. I think, again, the most important thing to both Chris and I are just finding great people that we feel like are purpose-built for that particular opportunity and that we feel like we have aligned values on and we can work with.
Mm-hmm. Now, I know that you guys look at a broad spectrum of things. Are there particular verticals or opportunities that you personally are most interested in these days? And I realize you don't want to preclude yourself from investing in other things, but what are some things that are fun or interesting?
Yeah, I tend to get really excited about marketplace businesses, and I love that marketplaces can cover a lot of different categories. There can be consumer marketplaces, there can be B2B marketplaces, there can be food marketplaces. I love that every marketplace is very different, yet they have the same sort of building blocks. And so for me, it's fun to think about the the challenge of supply and demand and liquidity and operations and pricing and how you have to build up in a way that allows the marketplace a strong foundation that will scale over time. And so I just love digging into businesses that are marketplace models, and that can be across a lot of different categories.
Mm-hmm. Got it. Okay. Do you have an example of a company that you have invested in during your last year or so?
Yeah, one of the marketplace models that I'm really excited about, it is actually my first investment, is around the future of work. So aligns very well with my experience at TaskRabbit. We found at TaskRabbit that we were really helping to change what the future of work looked like by providing a more flexible platform for people to find work and find labor. And so one of the companies that we invested in early on is a company called Work, WERK. And it's a flexible job marketplace. And they're going into Fortune 500s and helping Fortune 500s define flexibility in their roles and then making matches with consumers, particularly women, that may drop out of the workforce for a certain period of time, particularly when they're having children, want to come back in at higher levels, director, VP levels and above, but still provide that added flexibility for them to be successful in their careers.
Mm-hmm. And how does one find you? Like, this company Work, how did you end up meeting them, and what was the process like to be able to go forward with the investment?
So in the case of Work, we had been introduced to that company through a friend named Jessie Draper, who runs a pre-seed fund down in LA. She had done their pre-seed and then said, future of work, marketplace, incredible female founders, like, you have to look at this. And so we see a lot of investments through co-investors. Because our model is so collaborative, we typically are part of a syndicate whenever we get involved with a seed round in a company. So there's a lot of co-investors we work with on a regular basis that will send us companies or introduce us to founders. But also that cold email that comes in. My email is leah@fuelcapital.com, and people send me notes all the time and tell me about what they're building, and I love reading those emails and responding to them. And if it's not something we're going to invest in, we'll respond very quickly and say, like, hey, listen, it's probably not the right model for Fuel, but thanks for reaching out. But a lot of times we'll do, an initial phone call, an introductory, let's get to know each other and learn more about what you're doing. And, that doesn't have to, I strongly believe that you can be an entrepreneur anywhere, and you don't necessarily have to have that network fully built out and plugged in. And so, we want to be that first investor that really believes in you and really invests in you, maybe before anyone else does. And so sometimes those entrepreneurs just don't have the connections or the other people that can make the warm introductions to us. So, we're not afraid of the cold email and reach out.
Okay. So people, let's say they cold email you or they get a warm referral. Now what happens? You talk with the entrepreneur, and what does that process look like? Do both you and your team have to have conviction, or is it just you? And how long does that process typically take?
So what I love about Fuel, and when I thought about going into venture, one of the things I thought about is, where can I add the most value and how do I want to spend my day? And so finding a partner like Chris, who founded Fuel, has been incredible. It's just Chris and I that run the fund right now. And so the process is very lightweight and very easy. Both Chris and I like to meet with entrepreneurs that we're investing in. We'll typically meet with an entrepreneur separately, one-on-one. And then sort of the next step after that is to bring them in and meet with them together, the 3, 4, 5 list, depending on how many co-founders there are. And then from there, we can get conviction pretty quickly and move forward fairly fast. And it's a lightweight, simple process. I think at the early stage at seed, sometimes there's not a lot of data to diligence on and not a lot of customers to call or do reference checks on. And so really it's more about sitting down with the founder in person, one-on-one, or, Chris and I together, and just understanding what their vision is and seeing if our visions are aligned.
Okay. So how do you get conviction? Like, what kinds of things do you think about after you've met with the founder, maybe 1 or 2 times? Like, what goes through your head?
I'm a very, I'm definitely quantitative because I'm an engineer and because I was a math major. But at the same time, I think I have equal doses of just qualitative as well. And I like to sit down in person. I mean, we'll do video calls, we'll do phone, but it's really not until I can meet someone in person that I feel like I can look them in the eye and understand what their vision is for their company and what led them to this moment where they're sitting in front of me today. And I feel like because I am a founder and I've built a company from nothing and scaled it and, over the course of a decade, it's really hard. I've seen how hard it is, and I think that you have to have this added level of purpose and conviction and passion around what you're doing to really be successful. And so when I sit down with a founder, I just want to hear about their story and their background and what led them to this moment and really assess and understand, if they're going to have that drive and that passion to not just climb over walls and go around walls, but to bust through walls, because it's going to take, moving mountains to make their startup work, to make any startup work. And so to me, that is just as important as, is the market size big enough? Does the business model work? Does it seem like the revenue model, is going to work as well? It's all those other sort of softer things.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, all right, let's say that a founder now becomes a portfolio company of yours. What kinds of support do you guys provide your companies? Like, what does the cadence look like as far as communications go?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say that we follow the founder's lead. We certainly want to be helpful, and we're always supportive. Some founders, are like, I got this, just let me execute for the next 18 months. In those cases, we'll tend to get really involved and really helpful in teeing up that Series A round of financing. So I love fundraising. I just think it's so much fun. I loved it for TaskRabbit. I loved, meeting the LP base and fundraising as part of Fuel as well. Chris is incredible at pitch decks. He has a background in marketing and advertising. And so he's really good at the storytelling piece. And so the two of us together, we can, meet with the founder, get them ready for their Series A pitches, introduce them to co-investors who might want to lead the Series A round, and just make sure the story is tight, the pitch deck is tight, and sort of send them on their way. In other cases, particularly if it's a marketplace business, I love to, dig in early on and just hear about how they're thinking about supply and demand. And if I can add some insights from my experience operating and running TaskRabbit, that has been helpful in a lot of different instances, either just from an operations standpoint, if someone's building a geo-located company, a geo-specific company, a marketplace business, all of those things, I feel like I found shortcuts. I found things that maybe even the entrepreneurs might want to avoid in the beginning, mistakes I've made that I can share. And so we help in a lot of different ways. Chris, again, has an incredible track record with dev tools and infrastructure companies, and so he's seen a lot of these companies like PagerDuty, CoreOS, Parse, Heroku, and others scale over time. That's really valuable perspective to have as we invest in these early stage dev tools infrastructure companies. We can share experiences of what we've seen with other successful companies as well. And so there isn't a specific cadence or a specific template that we like to follow after we invest. We really follow the founder's lead and whatever they need from us.
Got it. Okay. Well, thanks so much for coming on this show, Leah. Really appreciate it. And that has really boiled down a lot of interesting things all into this 20-minute period. So thank you for doing that.
Yeah, thanks for having me.